Greetings, true believers. Welcome to Movies for Dumb Guys. I am your host, Joe Johnson, and I am joined by Ryan Sharp.
With great power comes great responsibility.
And Tim Williams.
Eggshell shear.
I was going to save that for last, but okay.
No, I got something better.
We all learned of the tragic news recently of the great Stan the Man Lee of Marvel Comics passing away. He has been responsible for such an enormous part of pop culture in general. I don't know if anyone had a greater impact on pop culture than Stan Lee. I was lucky enough to see him in person about a year ago at the 2017 LA Comic-Con. It was in his name. It was Stan Lee's LA Kamikaze, I think they called it. And he was there. And at one point, I was waiting to get into this velveted, roped-off area. Our TV crew was in there doing some interviews and shooting video. And I felt this presence to my left, and I turned, and Stan Lee was standing right next to me. I couldn't believe it. And so they let him into the roped-off area, and he went in there and did a podcast or some sort of broadcast with the Black Eyed Peas and Flava Flav, and he was just so great, so witty and charming. I mean, at the age of, his mid-90s, he passed away at 95, he still was as sharp as a tack and just really funny. And then the Saturday, the day after that, he came out onto the main stage and introduced The Rock, who was there to promote Jumanji, and had the audience laughing. He introduced The Rock by saying, now this guy used to be a 98-pound weakling until I taught him a few things, and brought The Rock out, and the crowd just went nuts. And Stan Lee was a rock star. I mean, this guy, when he came to the Motor City Comic-Con about 4 years ago, traffic on 696 was backed up. I remember my sisters complaining to me that this Comic-Con was backing up traffic, and a big part of that was the fact that Stan Lee was making an appearance, and he was quoted as saying that he was surprised by the turnout. The guy was a rock star. Now, I grew up not necessarily reading Marvel comics. About the only comic I read as a kid was Star Wars. So the comics weren't a big part of my life, but there were animated shows and stuff that I grew up with, and that's what exposed me to these Marvel characters. As a matter of fact, I have a little clip here of some of the themes to some of those shows.
You'll behold in breathless wonder. Reckon the town with the power of a bull.
Ain't no monster clown who is as lovable
As ever-loving Hulk. Hulk, Hulk.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
As Iron Man, all jets ablaze, he's like jets like quick repulsor rays.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
That's probably the most famous theme out of all of them. So that's how I was introduced to Marvel characters. Ryan, what role did Stan Lee and Marvel Comics play in your youth?
In my youth, not very much. I also was not a comic book reader, but he still, he always, even when I first found out who he was, he had this, way about him, aura about him that, you just knew he was someone of importance and such a likable guy. And, of course, the Amazing Spider-Man theme song, super, super recognizable. I didn't read the comics. However, when I was growing up, there was a lot of action figures, and I definitely rocked some Spider-Man underoos. And
did you wear them today in tribute?
I did.
Nice.
And for you ladies, we're taking bids on pictures. We're sending pictures out. Definitely pop culture all over the place with this guy, and definitely influenced my childhood in many ways, even though I didn't read the comics. So what he's known for still was able to capture someone who wasn't interested in reading comics. So that just kind of, shows you his reach.
Yep. Tim, what about you?
It's a little blurry, the timeline on what I knew first or didn't know first, because the theme songs that you just played, those were a little bit before my time, but they did replay them. So I do remember like watching those as a kid. I specifically remember buying, well, I think my cousin, he was like a huge collector from Virginia. When he would come up here, he would have comics and I would like read them. And I think that was before I finally bought my first one. And I remember it was in 4th grade, and they had like a rack of like old books and comics and stuff. So I bought 2 comics. It was Avengers 195 and 196. And 195 was the at the end of it, there was like the first cameo appearance of the villain, the Taskmaster. And then the one after that was like the full appearance of the Taskmaster. But anyway, that one involved Ant-Man and Wasp and Yellow Jacket more than anybody else. And they were all like captured. So I didn't really know. I mean, so I thought that those 3 characters were like the main characters in the Avengers at the time. But from there, me and my next door neighbor, best friend, I remember we would go to, not every Saturday, but a lot of Saturdays we would walk up to the drugstore, and they had like a big comic book collection. Turns out that a kid that I went to school with, his older brother, was like another huge comic book collector, and he worked at the store, so he was responsible for bringing all the comics in and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So we would pretty much go there, like, I mean, if we could go there every Saturday, we would. I mean, it was almost every Saturday we would go and buy like a couple of comics. And I would say him and I were pretty much Marvel all the way. I don't really remember buying DC comics. He might have bought a couple, but that was mainly.
Ooh.
No, I mean, to me at the time, I probably because of Super Friends, the DC characters were lame to me. I mean, at that point, I mean, come on, Batman. The Batman that we had been exposed to up until that point was pretty silly.
Oh yeah. I mean, Batman didn't get dark and serious until probably the 80s, like with Frank Miller and that sort of thing.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I didn't continue to just read Avengers. I mean, I would buy an Avengers. Basically, when we were a kid, we would just say we would pick whatever that had the coolest cover. Mm-hmm. So I mean,
and that shows you the weight of how important a cool cover was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's not like I really collected any continuing storyline or anything like that or any series. I would just buy whatever. But I ended up with a decent sized collection as a kid, and unfortunately, those all got ruined when I was a kid. And then I started collecting again in like 1992, pretty hardcore. So now I have like a ton.
Is that what those boxes were in your black and white photo?
Yeah.
It's all comics.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, when you think about the thing that I'm amazed to learn about Stanley is the ethics and the morals that he had, and I had to imagine him infusing that in every Marvel comic that he oversaw, and you have to think about the impact that they had on young readers reading those comics. I was browsing on YouTube and I stumbled across this video clip where someone just had their phone and they recorded Stan Lee with this message, and it really moved me, and I wanted to share this message with everybody.
Hi, heroes. This is Stan Lee coming at you. Want you to know, Marvel has always been and always will be a reflection of the world right outside our window. That world may change and evolve, but the one thing that will never change is the way we tell our stories of heroism. Those stories have room for everyone, regardless of their race, gender, religion, or color of their skin. The only things we don't have room for are hatred, intolerance, and bigotry. That man next to you he's your brother. That woman over there, she's your sister. And that kid walking by, hey, who knows? He may have the proportionate strength of a spider. We're all part of one big family, the human family, and we all come together in the body of Marvel. And you're part of that family. You're part of the Marvel universe that moves ever upward and onward to greater glory. In other words, Excelsior.
I mean, that gives me goosebumps listening to those words and knowing that he infused that in the titles. And we're going to go over some of the characters that he created.
Can I just real quick
Jump in.
I just remembered something that happened to me that I said I wasn't a comic book guy, but you talking about collecting comics that made me think of this story. Growing up, somebody that lives with us, it's basically like a family member, but there's no blood relation. That doesn't matter. But her dad actually owned a comic book store. And so I did get into comics for a brief second because I got to do what any hardcore comic book fan would love to do. They closed his store when he passed away. And I got to go through the comic store and take whatever I wanted.
Wow.
And I took a lot. So my collection was pretty amazing. And, he was an older guy, so he had like the old stuff. It wasn't just all this new crap. Not that it's crap, but, it was like older, valuable, amazing Spider-Man and Thor's and Hulk. And it was every comic book kid's like fantasy. And I got to live that out.
awesome.
So.
Dreams like that. What
Yeah,
happened to that
exactly.
collection?
It's whittled down over the years and, moving and giving them away to people and selling them at garage sales and just kind of reducing things down. Now I still have a small box of just what I considered my favorites. Again, I never read them, but it was just based on the cover and how the cool factor of that. But
That's a great story.
yeah, I forgot all about it until you started talking.
So a young Stanley Lieber wanted to write the next great American novel. He ended up taking a job at this comic book publisher, and he was kind of embarrassed by it. So when he was asked to write some text filler for Captain America Comics #3, which was cover dated May 1941, he used a pseudonym, Stan Lee, because he didn't want people to see his name on this drivel, and he ended up legally changing his name eventually. The publisher, in response to a little title called Justice League that DC was publishing, the publisher approached Stan Lee and said, we need a superhero team. We need something to rival the Justice League. And at this point in his career, Stan Lee was talking about changing careers. He felt that what he had gotten himself into wasn't satisfying him creatively. So he talked to his wife, and she said, look, the worst that can happen is if you come up with an idea and it fails, you just move on to something else. So why don't you do something you love, something you've always wanted to do? So he had this idea about the superhero team that was like a family, and they bickered and they fought and they had flaws and they weren't perfect by any means. And they called it Fantastic Four, and it came out in 1961. He co-created it with Jack Kirby. Stan Lee was primarily the writer, but he let the artists contribute significantly to the development of the character and the story. As a matter of fact, sometimes the artists would draw panels, and then Stan Lee would fill in captions and balloons and things like that. So he worked in conjunction with the artists to create characters and stories. So Fantastic Four was his first successful collaboration. And, of course, that influenced several films, and that's going to be sort of our focus today, are the films that were inspired by Stan Lee's creations. So based on Fantastic Four, the first film to come out was created in 1994. It was a Roger Corman film, right?
Yes.
And apparently the actors and everyone who was involved in the film didn't realize that the film was being made with no intention of ever being released.
Correct.
The person who held the rights to Fantastic Four was going to lose them unless he began production on a film. So they started production on this film, and nobody realized that it was never going to be released. Since then, with the internet and everything, people can now access that film. Now, I've never seen it. Tim, you've watched it. What are your thoughts and impressions of that film?
I owned it or do own it on VHS, but I think I think I might have lent it to somebody and never got it back. But either way, there's nothing wrong with this movie. I mean, it's 1994. I mean, and consider the ones that were made before that, like The Punisher and with Dolph Lundgren, and I don't know if the Nick Fury one was out before that.
Hasselhoff. We'll be talking about that in a little
Was
bit.
that out before that? Oh, okay, but either way, there's really nothing wrong with this movie. I mean, I mean, it's a little cheesy, but with a Roger Corman movie, you know that it's not going to be big budget. I think it was only like $1 million budget. For $1 million, what he did with this movie, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. To me, it is the best version of the Fantastic Four films that have been out yet.
Yeah.
I did like the one with the Silver Surfer later on, but there's really nothing wrong with this movie.
Now, last night I sat down and I watched Fantastic Four that came out in 2005. And whenever I bring up that title, people say, oh, the Jessica Alba movie. She clearly is the star of the film. But I thought Chris Evans was great as Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. Michael Chiklis was the Thing. He wore that kind of big foam rock suit. We'll talk about that in a second. And I don't even know how to pronounce Mr. Fantastic's name. Ian Grufford? I don't know.
I think it's Gruffold.
Gruffold, okay.
I think you missed
he
that
was
element.
Mr. Fantastic. And then Julian McMahon was Victor Von Doom. Currently, it has 27% positive on RT. I think that's low. I think the movie's underrated. I sat down and watched it last night, and I actually enjoyed it. Now, I'm not a hardcore Fantastic Four fan, so I'm sure hardcore fans go, that's not what happened in the comics. But I think it's fairly entertaining. I thought the actors were very engaging and likable, and I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. Now, of course, there's the debate about the Thing's costume. Should they have gone CGI? Well, we're talking 2005. I don't think CG was quite there yet. I think it was on its way. And I actually applauded the decision to go with the foam suit. I think it allowed Michael Chiklis to be more expressive with his face, that you could see his eyes, you could see his mouth, and his character was really likable and tragic. And so, I don't know, I liked the movie, and like you, I liked Rise of the Silver Surfer. That has only got a slightly better rating on Rotten Tomatoes at 37%. And then they did the reboot 2015, which I don't even know what they were thinking when they did this. It might have been another case of trying not to lose the license.
That's exactly what it was.
Now, I haven't seen it, so I can't knock it, but it only has a 9% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And people I talked to that have seen it said this movie is terrible. Ryan, have you had a chance to see any of these Fantastic Four movies, and what are your impressions of them?
I saw the 2005 Fantastic Four and the Rise of the Silver Surfer. I, like you, actually enjoyed these movies. I was confused when everybody's bashing them and stuff, and maybe, like you said, it is the diehard fans, and that wasn't me for the comic books. I found them to be very entertaining. Like you said, Chris Evans, man, what a star. Like, he cracked me up in this movie. I loved the writing of his character. Obviously, Jessica Alba does some things to me, and when she was like, the thought that she was naked and that could come back at any time, I was like, do it, come on, do it, get an R rating. That didn't happen, but still the potential was there. So
I laughed out loud when like the nurse is like, "You're hot," and he's like, "Thank you, so are you."
Yeah,
I love the delivery of those lines.
Well, you know how I love that sarcastic, quick wit, and definitely had it in that movie with Chris Evans. And I thought Victor Von Doom was great. Like, he was a great villain. I thought the Silver Surfer, I thought that was visually, I really liked how they came with that character. So,
I agree.
I totally disagree with Rotten Tomato people on this one. Is it the best ever? No, absolutely not. But if it's on, I'll sit and watch it. Absolutely.
Now, Stan Lee was quoted as saying that Michael Chiklis, his depiction of the Thing was one of his favorite portrayals of any Marvel character in movies. He loved what Michael Chiklis did with the Thing, and I agree.
Except for it's so sad. Like,
his wife,
his story is like the worst story. Like, I'm like, man, this
it's brutal.
And then at the end, where you got to choose, and it's just like, man, like,
yeah, it is tragic, and that's what makes it so good. Like, my heart aches for the character. Now, the Von Doom character, I guess that was the biggest departure in the film. That in the comics, he turned into Victor Von Doom a completely different way by an experiment that he had done that had gone wrong or something. So they had to tweak it for the film, but I have no problem with it. Like I said, not having read the comics, I enjoyed the movie. So
Everything's tweaked for the film.
if you haven't seen the Fantastic Four movies, at least the ones from 2005 and 2007, check them out. Give them a chance. Don't listen to the critics on this one.
Here's where they dropped the ball with Rise of the Silver Surfer. Galactus. They could have easily done something else with him instead of just showing him kind of. I mean, they made him as a cloud. I mean, if you're gonna take the time to do a giant CGI cloud with the tentacles coming out of there, just make a Galactus. What's the issue there?
Yeah,
just make one.
Yeah.
Or at least do something, or go away from that storyline and just debut him at the end and leave it open for him to be in the next one or something.
Right.
That was my issue with that one.
Yeah.
I was not a fan of what they did with Victor Von Doom. Only because in the comics he was like, I just don't think that they did it correctly, because in the comics he was like one of the biggest, and as far as I know, he's still one of the biggest baddies in the comics, and he just didn't come off like that in the
Do you
movies.
when people make a movie from a book,
Mm-hmm.
do you hate the movie because it doesn't stay true to the book? Also,
Sometimes.
I'm just curious because comics, they say it's a graphic novel, so. And then, of course, when you take a book and turn it into a movie, rarely does it translate 100%. So I was just wondering if it was the same
I'm not even saying
same
that
sort of thing.
I'm not even saying that it had to be 100%. But obviously, the next step in those movies would have been Galactus. So to lame out the way they did with him, it kind of, I think it just cut their legs off right there.
There's two challenges that filmmakers face when they're trying to adapt a comic book. One is not to make these characters look cheesy and stupid, and the other is to take something that's so broad and has been told, the stories have been told over decades, and to somehow pick the best of that and turn it into a 90-minute or 2-hour long movie. That's such a huge challenge. So let's move on to Stan Lee's next creation. So Marvel is publishing a title called Amazing Fantasy, and they decided they were going to end the run with number 15. So they allowed Stan Lee to kind of tack on a character that he had created with Steve Ditko because they said, well, this title is coming to an end anyways. So on the cover of Amazing Fantasy 15 is Spider-Man with this villain under his arm swinging across a cityscape. And that copy sold so well that Marvel was like, oh my God, we're on to something. Now, the remaining issues of Amazing Fantasy 15 that still exist, one mint condition recently sold for over $1 million. That particular issue of Amazing Fantasy has really taken off. And I actually do know somebody, I won't name names, but I do know someone that owns a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15. They have it in a bank.
It's Rich Rollins. Go to his house and take it.
People can start breaking. Why are people breaking my windows? So that was an enormous success. Now, like I said, I didn't read the comics, but I watched the animated series. And for those of you who grew up with the Electric Company, not only was the great Morgan Freeman on the Electric Company, but they actually introduced the first live-action Spider-Man on the Electric Company, and I absolutely loved it. I loved that Spider-Man. That was on the Electric Company beginning in 1974, and then the Amazing Spider-Man live-action TV series debuted on television starring Nicholas Hammond. That began airing in 1977 and ran through 79. And to be perfectly honest, I was not a fan of that one.
Yeah, I don't.
Spider-Man looked silly.
Yeah,
he had what looked like swimming goggles on. Him scaling walls and stuff were absolutely ridiculous. You could tell he was being pulled up by cables and just kind of wiggling arms and legs.
Yeah.
So the live-action Spider-Man TV show left a lot to be desired. Then comes 2002. Spider-Man rolls out on the big screen in movie theaters, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, William Dafoe as the Green Goblin. That currently has a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I absolutely love the first Spider-Man. The only complaint I had then, and I still have today when I watch it, is that the decision to go full CGI on Spider-Man when he's swinging around, I thought that was a mistake. Bring in a Cirque du Soleil guy, put on the Spider-Man outfit and green screen him, I think would have been more convincing than doing full CGI. Every time they went to Spider-Man swinging around, to me, it felt like a video game. I felt like they just weren't there to make a convincing Spider-Man.
You never go full CGI.
And so then they follow up in 2004 with Spider-Man 2. Alfred Molina is Doc Ock. That has a 93% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Most people call it the best Spider-Man of that particular era. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Then there's Spider-Man 3, came out in 2007, and this is where the trouble began. They were trying to introduce too many characters. You had Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. You had Topher Grace as Venom. And it was a convoluted mess with Tobey Maguire going through a goth phase. And it's a little difficult to watch today. And that almost killed the Spider-Man franchise. Fast forward several years, they reboot Spider-Man with The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, whose director is named Mark Webb, which I thought was interesting. Starring Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone. It has 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. I hated it. Hated this version of Spider-Man. I thought Andrew Garfield didn't get it. I thought he was condescending. I thought he was smug. Not the happy-go-lucky, fun Peter Parker that I was used to seeing. And then to make it even worse, they do Amazing Spider-Man number 2 with Jamie Foxx as Electro, whose puns were as bad as Arnold Schwarzenegger's in Batman and Robin. And at this point, I wanted Spider-Man to go away. I thought those two movies were just god-awful. And then they bring him back in a third incarnation starring Tom Holland, who I absolutely love. He was introduced in Civil War, right? That was our first glimpse of Tom Holland as Spider-Man in Civil War, where he battles Captain America, and that was really entertaining. Mm-hmm. And then he got his feature-length film, Homecoming, which was pretty darn entertaining. Michael Keaton is the Vulture. And now we could all expect Spider-Man Far From Home to come out in 2019. So, Ryan, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Spider-Man in the movies?
Well, I really enjoyed the first one in 2002 with Tobey. I thought it was really well done. I even like Kirsten Dunst, which I'm not a big fan of. I thought it had some good things to it. Yeah, the CGI was a little hokey, but I think it bothered you more than it bothered me. We've seen some bad stuff in the past, so this was, every step is an advancement. So it just keeps getting better and better. Mm-hmm. So I didn't hate it. I definitely liked the second one. James Franco, I'm a big fan of his. The third one, it had a lot going on. It wasn't my favorite one of the three, but I didn't mind it at all. There were some moments in these movies that are now part of pop culture history and been parodied. And the kiss, right?
The upside down kiss is
iconic. Everybody knows it. Everybody talks about it. They've done recreations on it. It's a talking point on the tour.
I know. How cool is it when they're like, you see that alley over there? That's where the kiss took place. And I'm like, got my camera out. Ooh.
Yeah, right. And then even talking about how they had to stuff his nose with Vaseline and cotton so that he didn't drown. He was getting waterboarded with that kiss. So the things you do to kiss Kirsten Dunst, I don't know. Now, where we differ in opinion a little bit is the Andrew Garfield ones. Not my favorite Spider-Man, but I still was entertained. I think my favorite is the new ones. I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man we've had.
He's fantastic.
He really is. But
he has that wonder and that awe of playing that character. And when in Civil War, when he's like, "Hey, you're Captain America," as they're beating the crap out of each other.
And I love the home footage that I think that's just brilliant. The one thing that I didn't like about it was the super suit.
It's a little too techy.
Yeah. So I think they went a little too far for my liking on that, but very minor complaint for that movie. So I thought he is and will be a great Spider-Man, and hopefully for a long time to come.
Yeah, and how tragic. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but that moment in Infinity War where he's in Tony Stark's arms. Ooh, man, almost.
That's like Oscar-worthy acting right there. Like
I agree.
I didn't. Everybody else that poofed away, I was like, okay, but him, I was like,
Yeah,
what?
that tugged at the old heartstrings.
That line was ad lib too.
Yeah,
He was not. That wasn't written for him.
Wow.
He just said that at the end.
well, that's another great movie moment.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So, Tim, your thoughts on Spider-Man in the movies?
Okay, well, going back to comic book buying as a kid, more often than not, Spider-Man had the coolest covers.
Yeah.
and there was
They were always dynamic.
and
yeah.
there was more than just the regular Spider-Man title. There was like Peter Parker. I think it was like Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man,
yeah.
maybe some other ones. So I had more invested in this movie going in than anything else, the first one, and I liked it. I thought it was a good start to Spider-Man on the big screen. I mean, it is what I dreamed about as a kid seeing. I didn't like some of the minor things that they changed about it, but it's not my favorite. But at the time, I really enjoyed it. Then the second one, I agree with you totally. Even though they changed around Dr. Octopus quite a bit, that movie I loved, and I can't say that I originally loved the first Spider-Man, but watching Spider-Man 2, I was like, this movie is a lot better than the last one. I think they improved on it quite a bit. Spider-Man 3, I was really looking forward to because of Venom.
Yeah, I wanted to see them go toe-to-toe. Yeah.
But what do? They kill Venom off, and they turn Sandman into a good guy at the end for some reason, which made no sense to me. I rented The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and got 20 minutes into it, and I could not watch the rest.
It was
of
awful. It was terrible.
Here's the thing, which they didn't really do in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, but like in the comics, whenever he was fighting a bad guy, he was always talking trash.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the way that Andrew Garfield was talking trash. He was coming off like the bully to me.
I agree.
In the movie, and that's why I couldn't get through it. I was just like, this is not Spider-Man. It's this guy's just a jerk.
Yeah.
And
I felt the same way.
I never bothered to watch the one with Jamie Foxx because I didn't get through the other one.
Yeah.
But Spider-Man Homecoming I really enjoyed, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Tom Holland continue with if he does.
Now, I'm curious, just before we move on to the next character, you talked about some liberties they took in the film. Organic web shooters versus mechanical web shooters. Ryan.
Organic. I hate the mechanic. I hate it.
See, now that's the comic book Spider-Man,
Right.
though, so
I understand. I don't like it.
That is one thing that I thought they improved on. I mean, because why wouldn't? I mean, if he's starting to get all these spider powers, why wouldn't he be able to do that?
the only complaint I guess people have is that if they were truly organic, they would come out of his butt because that's where spiders shoot webs. But
Let's film it.
But I will say this: that was always a big thing in the comics with his web shooters running out of web, or getting damaged or whatever. That was always like a big thing in the comics. So. I could see both sides, but I had no problem with that. I actually thought that was a good improvement.
They still, with the organic web shooters, there were moments where he was kind of losing his power, and so they weren't always dependable. So they kind of addressed that a little bit. All right, let's move on to Stan Lee's next creation. He co-created with artist Steve Ditko, the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk in 1962. Now, again, beside the animated cartoon that was on, obviously, my exposure to the Hulk was the TV show that ran from 1978 to 1982, starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. So that was my exposure to the Hulk. My family gathered around the TV and watched the Hulk, and I really enjoyed it, really liked it a lot. Then the first movie came in 2003, starring Eric Bana. I remember taking my nephew, who at this point was about 6 years old, And I remember when the movie was over, I looked over at my nephew and said, "So what did you think of that?" And he said, "That was terrible." And I was like, "You are correct, sir." I hated the first Hulk. I thought it was god awful. So then when they tried rebooting it a few years later with Edward Norton, I just didn't even bother. I passed on it. Now, I know a lot of people say that was better than the first one, and I might still give it a shot. But I had no interest in watching another Hulk story. And then, of course, he became part of the Avengers and all that. And that's when I realized that I think the Hulk is best less, like when he's part of an ensemble. Even though I did love him in Thor Ragnarok, where they give him a little bit more screen time. But so talk about that. What role did Hulk play in your growing up and watching movies, and what's your favorite version of Hulk, Ryan?
My favorite version of Hulk is when I'm in the bedroom.
Not sure what that means exactly.
Well, get me angry and you'll find out. No, I thought the TV show was really good when I was, growing up as a kid. I thought it was great. Maybe not great, but I enjoyed watching it. I thought there was some, I hated the ending every time, but
walking down the street by himself with that
hated it.
music.
Yeah. So I didn't really care for that. The movies were just absolute garbage. Like, don't even bother. Don't waste your time. And I totally 100% agree with you. He's best in short doses. They went, even in like Thor Ragnarok, I think they used him too much, and I didn't like it. Did
you like the fact that they allowed him to talk in this?
No, I hated it.
I thought it was amusing. I thought it was entertaining.
No.
But I see where you're coming from.
Like, it was perfect, and like when he was like kicking the crap out of Loki, didn't say anything. He just slammed him all over the place.
He did say at the very end, "Puny God," right? And
Yeah.
then he say that after he batted
and
him
that
around.
and maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
2 words, maybe 5 tops. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear his thoughts and hopes and dreams and philosophies. So I think Ragnarok went too far with it, but in the Avengers and things like that, small doses, I think he's a great addition to that ensemble.
Tim?
First of all, obviously, we know Stan Lee is known for having cameos in a lot of his creations, movies that come along later. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that his first cameo was in the Hulk made-for-TV movie, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, as a juror.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, I remember watching the Hulk. At that point, I was already a big Spider-Man fan. I liked the Hulk okay, but it was cool to have a superhero, a well-made superhero TV show at the time. But even back then, I would have. It bothered me that there was no super villains for him to go up against, really.
Yeah.
At least not that I remember. I mean, I know he went up against Andre the Giant as Bigfoot at one point.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was just him throwing around regular people or whatever.
Chased by the army,
Yeah. So the original Hulk movie, I did not hate it as much as a lot of people did, but I just think that Ang Lee went a little too artsy with it. I did like some of the throwbacks. It was, some of like the split screen stuff that he was doing and some of the music that was playing was a throwback to the TV show. To me, I mean, I think that's what he was attempting to do there. So I did like certain aspects of it, but I did like the Incredible Hulk because you actually have somebody finally to go up against him in Abomination. Why they never did that before, I don't know, but if you haven't seen it, you should actually check it out. And Ed Norton, I thought, did a great job as Bruce Banner.
All right. Yeah, they kind of changed that. I'm curious. Have you ever read anything about in Infinity War why they made the decision to have the Hulk sort of go in hiding? Now, I know he got his ass handed to him by Thanos at the beginning of the movie, but then after that, he refuses to come out. What did you ever hear anything about what the reason was for that? Was it?
I did, and I honestly don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
It
got annoying quick. Like, come on, Hulk. Come on.
There's some theories out there that I don't know if I believe.
Yeah.
But so I guess we'll find out.
I just couldn't help but think it was sort of a cost-cutting measure, but I could be wrong.
I don't
know.
think that was it. I think they want to unleash him in the next one,
Yeah.
and really unleash the Hulk.
Go
finally.
berserk. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the next character.
Real quick,
Yep.
I just want to say everything to our listeners that are watching live right now. Feel free to comment if you agree, disagree, or have an opinion.
On
we
Facebook,
want to
yeah.
interact with you guys here. So
All right. So that same year, Stan with his brother Larry and artist Jack Kirby creates a character called Thor. This was the first character that wasn't necessarily created by this team because Thor had existed in Norse mythology for eons. Stan didn't want to do Greek mythology or Roman mythology. He said people were too familiar with those characters. So he went to Norse mythology and adapted Thor and Loki for comics. I never got into Thor as a kid. I thought it was a little too wacky and weird with the Rainbow Bridge and all that stuff. That was just never my thing. So that when the Marvel movie came out in 2011, directed by Kenneth Branagh and starring Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman, I didn't go see this in the theater. I had zero interest in seeing Thor when it came out. No interest.
Wow.
And everyone said, Joe, you're nuts. You have to see this thing. And believe it or not, I did not see it until I was at my cousin's house one day, probably for the holidays or something. And when I told them I had never seen Thor, she shoved a Blu-ray into my hands and said, take this home and watch it. And so I did. Took it home, watched it, and I was angry at myself that I had so easily dismissed it. I thought it was fantastic. I love the humor in it. I love the fact that he was kind of this arrogant doofus. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm never going to question the Marvel Cinematic Universe again. That was a mistake on my part. I even liked Dark World, even though that got 66% on Rotten Tomatoes, came out in 2013. There were some weird things about it, but I didn't think it was horrible. And then, of course, I absolutely loved Ragnarok. I thought that was one of the most entertaining movies of 2017 and cracked, I think, my top 10 of greatest Marvel movies of all time. Absolutely loved Ragnarok. So now I'm on board. I love Thor. I love what Chris Hemsworth has done with the character, and I'm converted. Ryan, your thoughts on Thor?
hated Thor. Thor was garbage.
The first one?
No.
Oh.
Just the character. Like,
Oh, right.
hated
In the
him.
comics and stuff.
Then I had limited exposure to him. I remember when I was younger watching Adventures in Babysitting, and they had the guy that like fixes their car look like Thor, and the little girl was like, "You're Thor, you're him. Take my helmet and hammer, blah blah blah." And I was like, "All right." I'm like, I hate this. I hate Thor. When it came out, I changed my opinion as well. Still not my favorite character. I'm not a big Thor guy, but I do think the movies were really well done. I think that the casting of Hemsworth was great. He is Thor.
Loki, one of the greatest villains
All right,
of all time.
Now here we go with Loki. All the women, Debbie included, think that he is like a heartthrob, and all these women are like, "Oh, Loki! Oh my God!"
I don't know about a heartthrob. I think he's a great character, but
I know a ton of girls that have a huge crush on Loki. So,
okay.
I don't get it. I'm like, yeah, go for Thor. I get Thor, but not Loki. Whatever. But hey, I agree to disagree. But I think he's a great character, and I like the banter back and forth, and then the towing the line: is he a villain? Is he not a villain? Type of thing.
Yeah. Tim, your thoughts on Thor and Loki?
Yeah, I agree with you. As far as Thor, the character in the comics went, I didn't care for him at all because I just thought it was. I just thought it was so strange that they even had that character, and that was one of the things that I never really liked about some of the DC characters, namely Superman, comic book wise, because he was just so invincible.
Yeah.
And Thor was kind of the same way in the comics.
He was a god.
Yeah, it was just, it didn't make sense to me. But I did go see Thor because I wanted to see it just because it's a Marvel movie, and I did like it. and I agree with you. The Dark World was okay. I mean, there was parts of it that I really liked, but Thor Ragnarok I loved. I really liked how they kind of went back to more of like the underworld stuff and all of that. So yeah, I don't know. That's really all I got to say about Thor. But
right.
but I do love Thor Ragnarok.
Okay.
I see now Ragnarok. I didn't like the first time I watched it. I
Oh,
thought it was
loved
too.
It was light, but yeah.
too much comedy. But the second time I watched it, I really actually enjoyed it.
All right, we got a long list. We're going to try and get through as many as we can, so let's move it along. Also in 1962, Stan Lee created Ant-Man, also known as Giant Man in the Marvel Universe, with his brother Larry and artist Jack Kirby. But his creation originally was Hank Pym, who in the movies is the father, played by Michael Douglas. So Ant-Man's a relatively new addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starring Paul Rudd. First movie came out in 2015. I thought it was okay. Got 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think at this point I was getting a little burnt out on origin stories. I'm like, okay, then move it along, another origin story. So I actually preferred Ant-Man and the Wasp, which came out earlier this year, 2018. It actually has a better rating on Rotten Tomatoes as well. So I love Paul Rudd. I love his character. I love when he's battling either with or against the Avengers. But the movies don't rank very highly on my list of greatest Marvel movies, but I do appreciate him being part of the cinematic universe. Quickly, Ryan, your thoughts on Ant-Man?
Hate Ant-Man. I didn't like the character. I didn't like the premise of it. I do think Ant-Man versus Wasp had some redeeming moments, but overall, if he just shrunk away into nothing, I'd be okay with it.
Right. Tim, your thoughts on Ant-Man?
Like I said, one of the first couple of comics that I read, the main storyline involved those three characters: Yellow Jacket, Hank Pym at the time, Wasp, and Ant-Man. And so I thought that those were like the main characters in the Avengers for a while. So I was actually looking forward to it, and I would buy a lot of Ant-Man comics when his solo title growing up too. So Ant-Man actually was one of my favorite characters in the comics growing up. So so I liked the movie okay. I mean, Paul Rudd did a good job. I mean, it's still kind of different than what he was in the comics, but and then Ant-Man and Wasp, I was not crazy about. It just seemed there was actually a couple scenes in there that were just horrible acting all around, and it just seemed real choppy to me for some reason. I don't know. It just I'm surprised it's got 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, honestly.
Yeah.
But
It was
the
fun,
ending of
geez.
that
Yeah, that was crazy.
shocked me. Like for whatever reason, I wasn't even
Yeah.
thinking along those lines.
We'll see how
And
that
then
plays
it was
out.
like, bam.
All right, let's move on to one of Stan Lee's more famous creations. It's a year later, 1963. He creates character Iron Man with his brother Larry and artists Don Heck and Jack Kirby. And again, I wasn't reading the comics, but I was exposed to Iron Man through the animated TV series. Really poor animation. But I was never really an Iron Man fan until the movie came out in 2008, starring Robert Downey Jr. It's hard for me to come up with another movie that blew me away in the way Iron Man did. Man, this was a movie that made me want to get on my feet and cheer, like when he blasts his way out of that cave after being held prisoner. I think is one of the greatest movie moments of all time. The audience was cheering and clapping. Robert Downey Jr. was just charismatic and witty and had great lines. And my God, this consistently ranks as one of the, if not the greatest movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it was their first one, and just really reeled everybody in. And I thought it was a masterpiece. Number two is probably my least favorite Marvel movie out of all of them. I didn't like it. I was bored. I thought the villain was weak. And I knew this was necessary, but I didn't like to see Tony start to deal with his demons, even though I know he did that in the comics. I didn't necessarily need to see that in the movies. So Iron Man 2 is my least favorite Marvel movie. I thought they redeemed themselves a little bit with Iron Man 3, even though it was really lacking action. It was more of a character-driven piece. I enjoyed it, but nothing like the first one. I think the first one is not only one of the best Marvel movies, but one of the best movies I've ever seen. I absolutely love Iron Man 1. Ryan, your thoughts on the Iron Man movies?
So Iron Man, again, I absolutely hated as a character. I hated the theme song. Just not my thing at all.
Iron Man, Iron Man. Does
I have,
whatever an iron can.
Then the movie came out, and I did not see it right away because I didn't care about Iron Man. And then when I saw it, I was just, well, actually, to be honest, the first part of it, when he came out in that first suit that he made, I'm like, man, I hope this isn't what they're gonna like. But then it
was true to the comic.
Yeah. And but I love where it went. I love the sarcasm and what an ass he is. That's my type of humor. I like that sarcasm. And I think it was perfectly cast with Downey Jr. And it is probably my favorite Marvel movie to date. I can watch this over and over again. 2 and 3 I could do without. Not that they were the worst ever, but whatever. Iron Man though is cream of the crop.
I agree with you guys. I was never a Iron Man fan, even though he was in like the comics that I had, the Avengers comics growing up. But Robert Downey Jr., the way he played Tony Stark, really made that character for me, because in the comic books he was kind of like Bruce Wayne, kind of like super serious, and they didn't really do that with him. They let. I don't know if it's coming from Robert Downey Jr. or if they directed him to act that way, but thank God that he played it that way, and they had fun with it instead of just being like super straight up serious leader of the Avengers. I mean, they probably changed it now and made it more like the movies in the comics, made him more like that.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, Iron Man #1 blew me away. Probably still my favorite also. The second one, I agree, was disappointed with it. Besides Whiplash, was that also the one with Mandarin? Or
No,
was Mandarin in the third
was
one?
3, I believe. Yeah,
Okay.
Whiplash was 2, Mandarin was 3.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't a fan of either of the other two, but Iron Man 1 is
Don Cheadle
probably
sucks.
my favorite. Yeah, no, I liked War Machine. I like both.
Don Cheadle sucks.
I like both versions of War Machine.
Don Cheadle sucks.
One thing
I like him as an actor though.
I don't even want to think about, but I don't know if Robert Downey Jr. has an end movie. I know Chris Evans has announced that he's done with Captain America, but it's going to be heartbreaking for me when Robert Downey Jr. steps away from the role and they announce that they're going to move forward with another actor or something. That's going to be tough. That's going to be brutal.
You
to see
can't have a
someone else.
60-year-old,
I know.
70-year-old Iron Man. I mean,
know.
look what happened with Indiana Jones.
I'll be in the theater, but my arms will be folded, and I'll be like, "You're not my Iron Man. You're no Robert Downey Jr." All right, let's move on. You, sir. Let's move on to the next creation, the X-Men, co-created with Jack Kirby. Originally called the Mutants, but the publishers said nobody knows what a mutant is, so they came up with the name X-Men. The original lineup for the X-Men included Angel or Archangel, Beast, Cyclops, Iceman, and Jean Grey. X-Men #1 also introduced Professor Xavier and Magneto as the villain. Again, X-Men just wasn't really on my radar growing up. It wasn't until the 2000 movie came out. I went in the theater to see that. So excited that Patrick Stewart was cast as Professor X. He was just absolutely perfectly cast. Ian McKellen knocked it out of the park as Magneto. Hugh Jackson in a career-making turn as Wolverine. 82% on Rotten Tomatoes for the first one. Most people consider X2, the sequel, to be superior to the original X-Men. That came out in 2003. That has 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then they did sort of a reboot, kind of, where they had the original actors with new actors, and they did X-Men. Or no, actually, The Last Stand was the third of the X-Men movies. Most people consider it the least favorite of those three. It was the next one where they introduced new characters with old characters. That was X-Men First Class in 2011. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender were introduced as younger versions of Professor X and Magneto. Jennifer Lawrence stepped in as Mystique. I kind of missed, what was the actress's name that played Mystique, the model?
Rebecca Romaine.
Rebecca Romaine. Oh, my God, she was so amazing as Mystique. So, when it came to Jennifer Lawrence, I was like, I'll allow it. But I missed Rebecca Romaine.
And we all know, as long as Joe says he's allowing it, it's okay.
That's right.
Exactly.
And then they did a host of sequels. Probably my favorite of all the X-Men movies was X-Men Days of Future Past. Thought it was just incredible, the whole time travel element, Wolverine going back in time, and that amazing slow-mo. What was the Speed character's name? Was that Quicksilver? Or was that?
Yeah.
That whole sequence in the kitchen was one of the greatest, again, movie moments I've ever seen. That was just great. And then they left off with Apocalypse, which has a pretty low rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So quickly, guys, Ryan, what's your thoughts on the X-Men movies?
Never really cared for them. There's so many of them, and I get them all confused. And it's like
tough.
X-Men Firstborn, X-Men Geritol, X-Men Retirement Home. Like there's too much of them. I didn't really get into them. Wolverine was my favorite character, and that's it.
Tim?
I mean, for what they were, the first X-Men was okay, and I do want to mention this because I believe you mentioned this before. The worst line in that movie, what is the worst line in the original
It's
X-Men?
Halle Berry. You know what happens when a frog gets struck by
Right.
lightning?
Well,
Same as everything else.
Exactly. Well, I just found out that is because of a scene that got cut out where he had said something like that to her similarly earlier in the movie, but it got cut out.
Oh, so
so
she's
that's
referring
just
to
dangling out there as like
Wow.
one of the worst lines in the movie.
Huh.
But anyway, I mean, I thought it was fine for what it was. I'm not crazy about them. I think if Marvel gets the rights back to the X-Men movies, I think they'll be a hell of a lot better. X2 was good. The Last Stand was I didn't hate it. It was fine, I guess, for what it was. But I really liked First Class. I really liked Days of Future Past, and I did not care for Apocalypse much, mainly because of the way they did I was gonna call him Darkseid.
Yeah.
Apocalypse, because he just was just like too small, and
Right.
I think they really could have made it better if they would have just whited out his eyes.
Yeah.
That would have made it a lot better for me. But like there was something with his eyes that I didn't like the whole thing. But
Janelle says X-Men is only good as shorts in Deadpool. So
Yeah. All right, we're just about out of time. God, I hate to bring this conversation to an end. I'm really getting a kick out of this. Some other creations by Stan Lee: Doctor Strange in 1963, Nick Fury in 1963, The Avengers, of course, Daredevil in 1964. He created Black Widow and Hawkeye, and then, of course, the Black Panther in 1966, which I think is one of his most significant creations, which led to the 2018 movie, which has a good shot at getting an Oscar nomination, and some people are saying it might be the front runner for Best Picture.
they haven't seen A Star Is Born. But anyways,
it's going to be really remarkable to see a Marvel movie receive a Oscar nomination, and I'm going to be there on Oscar night to see what the heck happens. All right, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
yeah, how much time we got?
Less than a minute.
All right. I just want to throw out a couple of my favorite Stan Lee cameos. Iron Man, when Iron Man walks by and pats him on the back and says, "You look great, Hef." I thought that was great. I love when he delivers a package and calls him Tony Stank.
That was a good one.
I thought that was hilarious. And Deadpool, he's a stripper, a DJ at a strip club.
I
Also
like
hilarious.
the other Deadpool cameo when Deadpool comes out of the phone booth and he says, "Nice outfit," and Deadpool goes, "Zip it, Stanley."
Oh yeah,
That's probably my favorite.
that one
that was just in the
good, too.
trailer.
Was that in the
was-
trailer?
that was just in the trailer for Deadpool, yeah.
That was pretty great.
And then I like Big Hero 6, where he's like, "I wear my underwear front to back, inside out, and front to back again" for Fred's dad.
All right, we're going to have to wrap things up. We will leave you on this note.
Enough said.
Excelsior.
All right. Good night,
Enough
everybody.
said.